I thought my mother-in-law was family until I caught her setting up my husband's affair. What I discovered next destroyed everything I believed about the people I trusted most. If you've ever felt like someone close to you is working against your happiness, this story will hit you hard. Before I dive in, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with toxic in-laws. You know that feeling when something's off but you can't put your finger on it? That's where I was 6 months ago. My name is Claire, and I thought I had the perfect life. Beautiful house in suburbia, loving husband Mike, and what I believed was a supportive extended family. My mother-in-law, Sandra, seemed like the sweet grandmother type, always offering to help, always around when we needed her. But perfect lives have a way of cracking open when you least expect it. It started with little things. Sandra would mention how tired Mike looked, how stressed he seemed at work. She'd suggest he needed more guy time to decompress. At first, I thought she was being thoughtful. Looking back, that woman was planting seeds. Then came the suggestions about Rebecca. Rebecca was Sandra's yoga instructor, recently divorced. Such a sweet girl who could use some friends. Sandra kept bringing her to family gatherings, always seating her next to Mike, always steering conversations toward Rebecca's interests. When I tried to join in, Sandra would suddenly need help in the kitchen or remember some urgent task that require my attention. I'm not stupid. I noticed. But I trusted my husband and, honestly, I trusted Sandra. She'd raised Mike to be a good man, hadn't she? When you love someone, you want to believe the best about the people who shaped them. The first real warning sign came during our anniversary dinner. Mike had been distant for weeks, claiming work stress, staying late at the office. We're sitting at this romantic restaurant, and instead of looking at me, he's checking his phone. When I asked who was texting, he got defensive. Really defensive. That's not Mike. My husband is the most transparent person I know, or thought I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was eating at me, this gnawing feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake. Have you ever had that sensation where your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet? Your hands get cold, your stomach drops, and you can't explain why. I decided to check his phone. I know, invasion of privacy and all that. But sometimes your instincts scream so loud you have to listen. What I found made my blood freeze. Text messages.
Dozens of them.
From Rebecca. But here's the thing that made me physically sick. They weren't just flirty messages between two people having an affair. There were screenshots. Screenshots of conversations between Rebecca and Sandra, planning when Mike would be available, discussing what Rebecca should wear, even rehearsing conversation topics. My mother-in-law was literally coaching another woman on how to take my husband. I sat in my bathroom at 2 a.m, reading message after message, watching my entire reality collapse. Sandra had told Rebecca which restaurants Mike preferred, what cologne turned him on, even intimate details about our relationship that Mike must have shared with his mother. Details no mother-in-law should know, let alone weaponize. But the worst part? The absolute worst part was reading Sandra's reasoning. Claire doesn't appreciate what she has, she'd written. Mike deserves someone who makes him feel special. This woman had watched me work 60-hour weeks to help pay the mortgage on the house she visited every Sunday. She'd seen me care for Mike through his father's cancer diagnosis, had watched me plan surprise parties for his birthdays, coordinate family holidays, and decided I wasn't good enough for her son. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. 23 years of marriage, and my husband's mother was actively working to destroy it. I should have confronted them immediately. That's what a normal person would do, right? But I needed to know how deep this went. Because if Sandra could orchestrate something this elaborate, this calculated, what else had she been manipulating over the years? So I started digging. And what I found changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and myself. The next morning, I acted normal. Made Mike his coffee, kissed him goodbye, told Sandra I'd see her at Sunday dinner, like always. But inside, I was planning. I created a fake social media account and started following the breadcrumbs Sandra had left over the years. It turns out my mother-in-law had a pattern. Mike's previous serious relationship in college? The one that ended suddenly right before we met? Sandra had befriended the girl's mother, convinced her that Mike was too immature for commitment. She'd sabotaged that relationship too, but back then, she wanted him single so he'd focus on his career. Why was I different? Why had she let me marry her son if she was going to spend the next 2 decades undermining me? The answer came from Mike's sister, Jenny. Sweet, naive Jenny who had no idea what her mother was capable of. Over coffee, she mentioned how surprised Sandra had been when Mike proposed to me. Mom always said you were temporary, Jenny laughed, thinking it was funny. She figured you'd get tired of Mike's workaholic tendencies and leave on your own. But I didn't leave. I stayed, supported Mike through law school, helped him build his practice, became the daughter-in-law who remembered everyone's birthdays and organized family photos. I became permanent. And Sandra couldn't control permanent. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my marriage. This was about power. Sandra had controlled every aspect of Mike's life for 45 years, and I was the one variable she couldn't manipulate. So she decided to eliminate me. The affair had been going on for 3 months. 3 months of carefully orchestrated encounters, Sandra creating opportunities for Mike and Rebecca to be alone together. She'd volunteer to babysit for Rebecca's kids, then call Mike to help with something heavy at Rebecca's house. She'd plan family gatherings and conveniently forget to invite me until the last minute, then mention how Rebecca had nowhere to go for the holidays. My husband wasn't innocent in this, don't get me wrong. He made his choices. But Sandra had been working on him for months, convincing him our marriage was stale, that he deserved to feel young and exciting again. She'd poisoned his mind so gradually, so expertly, that he probably thought these were his own thoughts. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Sandra called me, voice dripping with fake concern. "Claire, honey, I'm worried about Mike. He seems so unhappy lately. Maybe you two should consider counseling, or perhaps some time apart to figure things out." She was giving me permission to leave my own marriage, actually encouraging it. This woman who had sat at our kitchen table every Sunday for 23 years, who had held my hand when I miscarried, who had called me daughter, was pushing me out the door so her son could run off with her yoga instructor. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to fight back. But I wasn't going to play fair, because Sandra sure hadn't.
I started documenting everything.
Screenshots, recordings, even a journal of every manipulative comment and backhanded compliment I could remember from the past 2 decades. You know how sometimes you don't realize you're being mistreated until you start writing it down? Page after page of subtle put-downs, boundary violations, and emotional manipulation that I'd excused as Sandra just being protective of her son. Then I did something that surprised even me. I called Rebecca directly. "Hi, Rebecca. This is Claire, Mike's wife. I think we need to talk." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Oh no. "Claire, I never meant for this to happen. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and what Rebecca told me shattered the last piece of my faith in family loyalty." Sandra hadn't just encouraged the affair. She'd convinced Rebecca that Mike and I were already separated. She told Rebecca that I was cold, unloving, that Mike was desperately unhappy but too guilty to leave me. Sandra had painted me as the villain in my own marriage. Rebecca had been crying through most of our conversation, but what she said next made me realize how truly evil my mother-in-law was. Sandra told me you couldn't have children because you were too selfish, that Mike always wanted kids but you refused. She said you were bleeding him dry financially and emotionally. I lost 2 babies to miscarriage in my 30s. Sandra held my hand through both losses, brought me soup, told me everything would be okay. And then she used my deepest pain as ammunition to steal my husband. That's when I knew I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my sanity, my truth, my right to exist without someone actively working to erase me. The confrontation happened at Sunday dinner, of course. Because Sandra loved her audience, loved playing the matriarch surrounded by her loyal family. I walked into that dining room with printed screenshots, phone records, and Rebecca sitting in my car outside as backup witness. "Mike," I said, placing the evidence in front of his plate. "We need to talk. All of us." The color drained from Sandra's face, but she tried to maintain control. "Claire, what is this about? We're trying to have a nice family dinner. Are we, Sandra? Because I've been having a lot of conversations lately about what family actually means. I laid it all out. Every manipulation, every lie, every calculated move Sandra had made to destroy my marriage. Mike's face went through about 5 different emotions: confusion, denial, anger, and finally, devastating realization. Mom? His voice cracked like a teenager's. Mom, is this true? Sandra tried to deflect, tried to make me the crazy, jealous wife. But I had evidence. Screenshots of her coaching sessions with Rebecca. Voice recordings of her bad-mouthing me to other family members. Even a particularly damning text where she celebrated Mike finally seeing Claire for who she really is. The room exploded. Jenny started crying. Mike's dad, who I'd thought was just along for the ride, revealed he'd known something was wrong but was too afraid of Sandra to speak up. And Sandra finally dropped the sweet grandmother act and showed her true face. You never deserved him, she screamed. I gave birth to him. I raised him. I know what's best for him. You're nothing but a cold, ambitious woman who trapped my son. 23 years of suppressed rage came pouring out of her. Every resentful thought, every jealous moment, every time she'd smiled to my face while plotting behind my back. It was ugly and raw and absolutely validating. Mike looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Mom, how could you do this?
Claire is my wife.
She's my partner. How could you try to destroy that? But Sandra wasn't done. She changed you. You used to call me every day, visit twice a week. Then she came along, and suddenly, I was just the annoying mother-in-law. She stole my son from me. And there it was. The truth Sandra had been hiding, maybe even from herself. This wasn't about my marriage being wrong for Mike. This was about her inability to let go, to accept that her son had grown up and chosen a partner. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Mike ended things with Rebecca immediately. Not that there was much to end once she realized how she'd been manipulated. We started marriage counseling because even though Sandra had orchestrated the affair, Mike had still made the choice to participate. But the real resolution came 2 weeks later when Sandra showed up at our house with a sob story about missing her son, about how family should forgive and forget. She expected Mike to choose her, like he always had. Instead, he looked his mother in the eye and said, "You tried to destroy my marriage. You manipulated me, lied to my wife, and used my trust to hurt the person I love most. That's not family, Mom. That's cruelty." We went no contact that day. Complete radio silence. Sandra's flying monkeys, other family members she sent to guilt us into reconciliation, got blocked too. It wasn't easy. Mike grieved the loss of his mother like a death, because, in a way, it was the mother he thought he knew had never really existed. Our marriage survived, but it took work. Months of counseling, difficult conversations, and rebuilding trust that Sandra had spent years undermining. We're stronger now, more united, but we're also more guarded. We've learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most capable of hurting you. The strangest part? I feel free in a way I haven't since I was in my 20s. All those years of walking on eggshells, trying to win Sandra's approval, second-guessing myself when she made cutting comments disguised as concern, it's gone. I can breathe in my own house again. 6 months later, we heard Sandra was telling people that I had brainwashed Mike against his family, that I was an abusive wife who isolated him from people who loved him. Even in defeat, she couldn't take responsibility for her actions. But here's what I learned through all of this. Sometimes the person working hardest to destroy your happiness is someone you'd never suspect. Sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about who actually supports your well-being. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. If you're dealing with someone in your life who smiles to your face while sabotaging you behind your back, trust your instincts. That cold feeling in your stomach when they're around? That sense that something's not right even when you can't prove it? Listen to that voice. Your subconscious often knows the truth long before your conscious mind catches up. Your story matters, and your happiness is worth fighting for. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, especially family who should know better. Hit subscribe if this resonated with you, and share your own toxic in-law stories in the comments below.